Norway has 15 to 20,000 too few workers per year for the next however many years, and we need to import talented individuals.
If you come here, this is what you get. This is the tax reductions. You get your mountain to yourself, you get one cabin.
If Oslo was a person,
Okay, this is interesting.
I think the characteristics would be almost like a reserved, well-presented, stylish, but hard to understand.
The obvious question then remains, why Oslo?
So if you have a good hobby, like repairing a bike.
I'm not sure they're good.
Okay, yeah. You know, it can be anything. If you can repair a bike, if you can knit, if you can sew, if you can wash windows, if you understand anything about mechanics or electronic reparation, you can go on vividspace.io and just register yourself as an entrepreneur. And whenever we have a need, we'll match you with a job.
That's cool. Invest in this. I do like an infomercial.
This is how the conversation should go. Like supportive and sort of
honestly,
enabling like Oslo is.
That's very cool. I think, in my opinion, something that is very, very needed, especially to get a broader community part, which I'm very interested in as well, is trying to get that and then match that. So you're like doing all the good stuff here. What's the top 10 things that you think are very important community building parts or very important for becoming Norwegian as well, for that sake, integration aspect of it?
Yeah.
Only the top 10? I want to hear her give the top 15, top 20.
True.
How much are you trying to remember right now?
Yeah, I was like top 10. I was like, I hope I don't repeat one in the list. But no, I think what you said is really valid, because there's something about communities that you need to have a location. Communities always need a space to build, history, culture, and have a relationship with. But you also want that space to not be an event that you come in and you utilize it for the duration of the event and then you walk away. So allowing people to have more flexible way of working and doing work that is related to an immediate need actually means that you can be in a community and you could be sharing a location and sharing a mindset and utilize your time partially productively.
Well, you've traveled quite a lot and you lived many places as well.
Yeah.
And the obvious question then remains, why Oslo?
You know, that's such a good question.
Yeah.
And I love that you're asking, because I know you love to travel. As long as we have a different sort of risk profile, but definitely love to travel.
What do you mean roller skiing is completely normal and safe?
I know. You know, touching on the whole thing, like I'm an immigrant. My family were immigrants, and I come from this mindset where the world is really an exploration path, that you should really try to see as much of the world as possible.
The world is your oyster.
Is your oyster, exactly. If Oslo was a person,
okay, this is interesting.
I think the characteristics would be almost like a reserved, well-presented, stylish, but hard to understand. And you kind of have to really date and find different circumstances to meet that person, so that you really get to know what they are about. So before moving here, I got the chance to date Oslo a bit. It's an exotic place to be, and I really
exotic
enjoy
in
it.
the absolutely opposite way.
Yeah, exactly, cold and difficult. Yeah.
This might be too personal to answer on camera, but what was it like dating a city?
It's one of my favorite, maybe, experiences when you go to a new place and you're trying to fit in without pretending too much, right? You basically, you go to different neighborhoods, you get lost a little because you take the bus in different directions, because when you first get here, the bus system doesn't really make a lot of sense. But you sort of really realize that you go 1 or 2 kilometers in each direction and the city changes completely. So Oslo is a fantastic city to date, because you really have to go into the detail to enjoy and find things that you like. And every time you go to a new neighborhood, you find something new. So I feel that dating cities is the best way of making decisions about, your life.
So I think my important part that I want to talk about and what I want to cover is the balance of lifestyle you can achieve here, and the community aspect of how many communities and the community building basically in Norway, which I think is very important as a foreigner, because I think everyone has tried feeling alone, and especially moving to a new country. I think what I've heard the most stories, most people move to Norway, it was not the plan. Like if you move to Mexico, it was very much on purpose. I moved to Mexico. If you move to Norway, it's always like, it kind of happened.
It was my plan.
It was?
Yeah.
Look at that. That's why you're sitting here.
That's why I'm sitting here on the couch. Yeah. Someone needed to defend the intentional Norway plan.
Exactly. It was my plan. No, so I want to talk about like this aspect of the part of the good life in Norway, which I at least see is very interesting. And then obviously the small communities, because Norway is a lot about small communities, in my opinion.
Give me a bit of a snapshot. How was your life as a Dane in Norway 2.5 years? Like a normal day for you, and then how is a normal day for you now that you're becoming Norwegian?
So, Danish, it was working, drinking, no, kinda. No, I mean, the big difference of working in Denmark or being in Denmark to Norway. In Denmark, it is obviously very much socializing, but it's not much activity. Maybe it's a bit of running, maybe it's a bit of walking, but it's mainly these small socializing groups. I think how my life has changed in Norway is I'm way more active. I'm doing way more stuff because you have the proper seasons here. You have 4 seasons in Norway, basically. So winter, you can go skiing with the ski group. You can do mountain climbing. You can go, it's like all year round. There's so many activities. I think how my life has changed is I'm way more balanced, and I get a lot of more dopamine, adrenaline, and really feel like I'm living the best life in a whole world. And I think there's one great poet has put it in a good way, and that is living the best of both worlds. Hannah Montana, great poets. And I think that the part of being able to having business and nature, just combining that and activity, is such a balanced, great life, in my opinion.
Your brand, your channel is called Becoming Norwegian.
Yeah, Become Norwegian, yeah.
Can you give a general definition of what that is for you, and what belonging is at the end of the rainbow? Like what does that look like?
No, I think in my opinion, I kind of want to give a fun inside way of living in Norway and how it is to basically integrate as an immigrant, so to say. Because I think a lot of people have one definition of Norway, and it's very stereotypically on each side. So either it's polar bears roaming the streets, or it's just mountains and great life. But I think there's in between the humor for me, is it? Because what happens when a Dane tries roller skiing for the first time? Absolute chaos, absolute chaos. What happens when you try cross-country skiing for the first time? Because you see it, and these Norwegians, little elves are walking around. So what happens if you do it yourself? So I think for me, I want to cover that life in a humoristic way, but also show how the different sides of it are. And I do this next to my normal job as well. So it is a very balanced life, so to say.
Everything you gave as an example is activity driven. Is belonging activities?
I would think so. I mean, at least in my opinion, everything is based around activity, smaller than big. I think the Norwegian word dugnad, for example, it's an activity of doing something for the greater good that does not cost anything, but it's always activity based. So cleaning the garden together for the house you're living in, and for example, it could be collecting trash on the beach. And I think Norwegians are very based on activities, and they even have their friends around activities. So they have their friends they ski with, the friends they hike with, then they do dugnads and together. So I think if you really want to get into the Norwegian culture, it is activity-based.
If you do something together, it's a starting point for evolving the relationship into a more non-activity-based friendship, right? And I think that Norway has this positive balance between you can still find community and you do all these things together, but you don't necessarily have to take the baggage, right? And I think that even at work is the same thing, that you have access to a lot of things, but then that expectation, how do you then develop that relationship further, needs to be a bit more contained. You know, you have to be a bit more reserved.
That's so interesting that you see that as a positive. Or the reference to a deepening of relationship almost as baggage, because you can have activities, relationships, but the flip side of the coin is that's actually hard to get below the surface with Norwegians. And back to the topic of belonging, the longer I've been here, the less I feel I belong. I still love it and want to stay, but it's the recognition that as an outsider, you're never actually one of them. You can go on all the dog sled rides and ski tours you want.
I think community is such an important tool for cities and for countries to really integrate. And that is every single community. And for example, your jam could be collecting socks. You have a hobby of collecting socks.
I absolutely do not, but thank you for noticing. What was it that you said? The Danish saying?
The Danish saying is that if you're giving yourself a compliment, you're saying you got pineapple in its own juice, and he's got pineapple socks, and I think that was very cool. No, but my point, just to kind of close it in, my whole point being was that I think the more communities there are in all different directions, the easier it is to get people to come. And I think if you've been on the other side of YouTube, you've seen like all the hobbies that exists, and opening and make it easy to make communities, and granting communities, and helping from the city, the country, to make it better and easier. And I think most importantly for me, if I look at the non-commercial side of it, it is to get people to enjoy their life in Norway, to get more active, to build community and get friendships. And it gives me such a joy, because I can relate to how sad you can feel and how lonely you can feel when you move to a new country completely alone. That is so different. And Denmark is closer than Portugal is, and California. Jesus, they must think there's polar bears, you know?
They've got some confusing ideas.
Yeah. Kyle, are you still alive? Where's your gun, mate?
I've been living in Norway for over 10 years, working in tech and with startups. I would love to build on your topic of becoming Norwegian, which I really take as a way of integrating into the life here, and talk about the actual practical aspect of what it would take to get to Norway. If you're coming from the outside and looking to move for work, and specifically from America in this sense, then there are certain headwinds that do parallel what I also experienced. And I don't know if you've experienced them yourself, so I don't know how much of this is actually basis for dialogue, but there is a bureaucratic process that is really not attuned to the speed of startups.
Yeah, I agree.
And maybe that's great for the work-life balance, but when your work is your life, or you have the motivation to be working on something new, something uncertain, then every day matters, every week matters, and so a 3-month processing time doesn't necessarily work for you.
No.
You know, you've both worked extensively with startups and have traveled a lot. Do you have any thoughts on programs in other countries, or ways in which to improve both startups' access to international talent, but international talent's access to Norway from a practical perspective, immigrating to find work?
Yeah, I think in my experience is like there's no more unconventional ways of hiring people and accessing talent. So you can actually build a workforce with people in very different locations and still have like ways of communicating that allow you to be productive. So I try to think a bit more borderless, in the sense that yes, it is challenging for you to get all the right documentation and the funding needed to recruit people from outside of Europe. But at the same time, there are ways on how you can still access that talent without formally recruiting.
I'm sorry, this is true, but Norway has 15 to 20,000 too few workers per year for the next however many years, and we need to import talented individuals, and right now there's an opportunity in the US to do so. So how do we say, yes, we actually do want them to come? My own bias, again, being from California, how can we attract Californians here in practice, in the law, in process, in integration into life here? And so that's to concretize why I'm asking the question. That's my interest.
I think if you think about it, right, and I try to look at from a sports aspect, right, because if something that tells you a lot about integration and how easy or difficult it is, let's say, football teams. If they sign a player, which often happens for other countries, how easy is it? And they have so many great options to get hired. You have special cards, special programs. I don't know, and this is my not knowing basically, is what's the program to get people to work here? Where it's a program of getting them into the country, living here, integrating. Is there a community-based aspect of this, of kind of learning from start to go? Is there extra parts like tax cuts, catch reductions? Yeah. Is there some investment part that makes it able and possible? Like, for example, scholar programs for schools and students is maybe quite lucrative, and they want to have people come and study. But I'm guessing they also want people to come work, because that's obviously good for tax and benefit. So from that aspect, I don't know if there's any very good programs that are really like put in stone of, hey, if you come here, this is what you get. You know, this is the tax reductions. You get your mountain to yourself. You get one cabin.
I don't think they have that in place yet. I think they're working on the cabin distribution.
I want my mountain.
Well, but there's several countries in Europe, and that's a fair point that you're making. And several countries in Europe, like with the COVID aftermath, they launched these digital nomad visas, where you can, from a period of time, if you have certain skills, you can kind of live in that country and have like a tax incentive to remain there, and then you have a lot of, you know, access to some funding to get your own company started or work as a contractor. I don't know where Norway is in terms of that direction in promoting it, but I also feel that as a society, opening up exceptions to a particular, let's say, workforce type or a particular skill set might create imbalance elsewhere. So then I agree with you that you kind of have to have something to attract people, but it shouldn't be limited to a specific skill set or a specific, because otherwise you start skewing the focus of innovation and you start skewing the priority of the type of immigrants you want to attract. So I think it's a bit of a difficult situation.